Hello friends, and welcome to another edition of Transformational Astrology. I'm Henry Seltzer, and we're here to talk about the solar eclipse that's coming up on August 11th, which is this coming weekend. We want to talk about it because of eclipse season, because this summer-long eclipse season has been very potent, as you all know, and because this is, of course, the third in the three eclipses that made up this extremely powerful eclipse season, featuring, in many cases, Uranus and Pluto. So without further ado, let's go ahead and look at the chart, and we can talk about it in more detail in that way. So here's the chart, and you can see that right now, or it will be actually this weekend on Saturday, on the 11th, very early in the morning, 3 in the morning on the West Coast, about 6 a.m. on the East Coast, and of course later with points in Europe. The thing about this eclipse degree is at 18 degrees of Leo and 42 minutes, with Pluto at 19 degrees of Capricorn and 20 minutes. Now, if you'll remember, the solar eclipse that happened on July 12th was exactly opposite Pluto. I mean, that was really powerful. That was a very strong presence of Pluto, and we've all been feeling it ever since then, I believe. This is the next new moon that comes after that new moon cycle, which is just ending. And here we have another powerful Pluto aspect. In this case, it's an inconjunct, or an 150-degree aspect. I call it an inconjunct. Some people call it a quincunx, which is also accurate. And the thing about this particular configuration here is also that we have to take into account the presence of Neptune at 15 degrees of Pisces, 48 minutes, almost 16 degrees, therefore making another inconjunct aspect to this eclipse degree. When we have two inconjunct aspects like this with a sextile between them, I mean, it would be absolutely perfect if Neptune was at 18 degrees, but it's still pretty powerful, a couple of degrees off. I think it's definitely important. It's 3 degrees total off. It would be definitely an important configuration to take into account, especially since these are such characteristic planets. We have a yod, which is what we call it when there's two inconjuncts and a sextile between them, a yod to the eclipse degree from Pluto and from Neptune. Now, the other reason that it's so significant is because Pluto and Neptune are two of the three outer planets, and Uranus is also emphasized in this configuration. So with all this outer planet emphasis, what are we seeing, what are we feeling, and what are we seeing around us in the current events? And, you know, it's just a quite amazing time. You could say that it's a cultural transition time. I believe that the culture is changing ever more so leading up to 2020, that this is a time for everybody to stand up and be counted, as I've been saying. Depends on how you vote with your heart, what side you're on, what you feel like you should be doing. But whatever it is, it's time to do it. And, you know, I think that that's brought out by the intensity of these eclipse configurations that we've been seeing. This whole summer is a really powerful time, including the fact, of course, that Mars is retrograde. And interestingly, Mars in its retrograde has moved to the very beginning of the sign of Aquarius. It's at 0 in this eclipse configuration. That's significant for a couple of reasons. One is that we have Chiron at 1 degree and 51 minutes of Aries, so there's a sextile there. It's square still at 0 degrees. It's still square to a stationary Uranus at 2 degrees of Taurus. And that Uranus degree of 2.5 degrees of Taurus is a very close trine to the Saturn, which is in retrograde motion, has moved back to 3 degrees of Capricorn. So we have what looks kind of innocuous, a trine between Uranus and Saturn. We think of trines as being rather mild, positive. There's a way out of it, and I suppose that's true. But in the case of Saturn and Uranus, it really indicates there's an extreme polarity in operation here. And I can say that with confidence because not only can we see it in the symbolism of these two planetary archetypes. You know, Saturn is all for holding back. It's considered the conservative planet of the zodiac. I mean, of the planets. And Uranus is all for going forward. It's a lot about kind of this trickster energy of anything goes. Let's try it. Let's do something completely unusual, out of the blue, out of the ordinary, sudden left turn, progressive, in other words. Let's experiment. Let's try the new thing. So we have many signs of the experimental in our society stemming from the 60s, when Uranus and Pluto were in conjunction, which heralded the beginning of a large transformative cycle that's still in progress today, where different things than were the cultural norm in the 1950s, especially here in America, well, all over the world, actually. These things that were departures from that kind of safe society that were tried during the 60s now are up for the test of whether they are viable or not. What can we do with these ideas? And we've seen many outbreaks in the 20-teens of the new things coming along. For example, the first black president we've ever had. A great deal of empowerment of women that we've seen. These were all things that started in the 60s, right? So the civil rights movement has had its flowering in the mainstream culture, and then there's also the backlash. You could say the racist backlash against other races other than the white race being involved in the way the country runs. Let's be frank about it. So we have these two powerful forces still in action. Back in the 60s, Saturn was opposite to that Uranus-Pluto conjunction, and right now Saturn is still involved. Saturn has been parallel to Pluto quite some time now, and Saturn is very involved in this particular eclipse, as we can see by the trine that it makes right now to Uranus. The Uranus-Pluto square is actually quite a bit out of shape now. The degrees there are more like 13 degrees, so it's quite a ways from the original square, which was exact in 2013, 2015. But, now Uranus is starting to move backwards. It will get within range of 10 degrees again. Right up till 2020, this square alignment between Pluto and Uranus is active. And what we see this summer is a real echo of that and the cultural transformation that's taking place. And it's a crazy time. Not only do we have the craziness of the polarity of stop and go, what do I do? Do I innovate? Do I completely throw over the traces and start a new project? Or do I be more conservative and stay the course and stay with what I'm doing and not try to go too crazy? Those are the choices that each one of us individually faces, and the choice is not going to be clear-cut. It's going to be according to what is the best for you, to taking into account both the conservative, careful approach, don't go too wild, don't walk out on the edge of a cliff and start dancing and maybe trip over. It's a complicated situation that you have to decide what is in your best future interest, according to the whole depth of your values, according to not just how much money you might make or how much success you might get, but also, right, what's important to you, what is your deepest value, what do you feel is really important to activate in your life, in the life of the culture around you. So these are the choices we have facing us now, and it's very interesting to see how this configuration is playing out. We have an early degree of Venus at 4 degrees of Libra, its own sign. And that is opposite the Chiron. It is making an angle to also, of course, Uranus. And it is in solid square alignment with the Saturn, which is right at the very beginning of Capricorn. So this is pretty intense, really. All the emphasis on all of the outer planets, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, all being emphasized like this. And in fact, there's even what you might call a sesquiyod, which is a yod formed with two sesquiquadrate aspects and the 90 degrees between them. You can see that in the fact that Saturn is actually very close sesquiquadrate to the 18-degree eclipse degree, and you can put the mouse on in the TimePassages software and see how close it is, and it's about half a degree off. So this is 135 degrees. It's a little bit more than 135 degrees to the placement of Chiron, and then you have the square between them. So there's a sesquiyod focused on the eclipse degree in this configuration. There's also a regular old yod between Pluto and Neptune focused on this eclipse degree in Leo. And Leo is all about taking individual action, and the side of Leo that's important for this consideration is also taking that individual action and making it work in the benefit of society, which is the Aquarius seed in the midst of Leo, to have social activism as part of your individual activism. Individually, you might be taking the center of attention, me, what can I do to show off and to impress you? That's Leo. But the deeper side of Leo is how can my individual actions contribute to the other side of Leo, the polarity point of Leo, which is Aquarius, which is social change and social evolution. And we have, of course, Mars holding that position, moving through the early degrees of Aquarius right now in retrograde. Now, the fact that Mars is retrograde, the fact that Saturn is so strong, it's kind of a difficult time. It's hard to get things done. We've all noticed that, I believe. With also Mercury retrograde right now until the 18th of the month. And right now it's close to the eclipse degree at 14. You can see this is the Mercury retrograde right here. And Mercury is actually in parallel, as it turns out, to Uranus. I can show you in the TimePassages software. You can right-click on the planet, and that's how you can see the declination, which is 12 degrees 5 minutes. And you can see that there's a parallel between the declination of Mercury and the declination of Uranus. If I right-click on Uranus, it's going to be 11.8, 11 degrees 50 minutes. So we're talking about quite a close parallel between Uranus and Mercury, which also empowers the Uranus that I've been talking about as being part of this very strong configuration that we're in the midst of. So the beat goes on. This whole summer has been about individual transformation, how that contributes to society, and social transformation that we see all around us, and how can we make sense of that? And where are we headed as a society, and what do we have to do individually to try to enable or empower the side that we want to vote for? How can we help that happen? And everybody has to make themselves counted right now. It's been said that the upcoming election in this country in November is the most important midterm election in the country's history. And why is that? Because the Supreme Court is up. There's a conservative appointment to the Supreme Court, which would lock it into a 5-4 conservative vote. And that's considered quite important. It's considered that Roe v. Wade, which is the abortion rights precedent, might be overturned. It's consistent with the Citizens United decision that was part of a previous conservative majority, which was only so-so conservative with Anthony Kennedy, that now would be kind of locked into a solid conservative 5-4 block. So it's very important to see that nomination goes the way you want it to go. And if you are for the judicial empowerment of conservative values, it's a good time to vote Republican, as you know, and to maintain the control in the House and the Senate, and therefore ensure that the agenda of conservative voices are enabled rather than stifled. And if you're progressive, it's time to stand up and be counted, and maybe take back the House and Senate, and maybe overturn the possibility of that appointment, which would be against most progressives' values, I think. So these are tough times, and you know, when the going gets tough, the tough get going, they say. And we might ask, what is the ultimate purpose of all this chaos? What is all this craziness leading to? And really, in testing times, you know, the Chinese say, may you live in interesting times. They have a Chinese, actually, ideograph, which represents both danger and opportunity, because that's when you do have the opportunity to take action and maybe save the situation and rise to the occasion. So that's what it's all about right now, rising to the occasion. And can we do it? And you know that that's the message, as I talk frequently, of Eris, which has also been prominent, not so much in this particular configuration now, but it has been prominent, very prominent in the recent full moon also. That the timing is, and it was very prominent in the past couple of years when it was very close to Uranus. Now Uranus is backing up toward it again, but there was that close conjunction of Uranus and Eris, which was in the summer of 2016, which has been ever since then, and really the whole year between the summer of 2016 and the summer of 2017 very strong. This whole idea of revolutionary change, it's time to take action, it's time to jump in and be counted, because Eris representing a feminine warrior energy for deep purpose being prominent, I think shows in the times, with the March on Washington after the one week after the inauguration of President Trump, and various other, the Me Too movement is another sign, the failed movement to block the pipeline in North Dakota, the Standing Rock protest. These are all signs of standing up and being counted for what is your own deep belief, and it's really time for everybody to do that right now. So that's the message of these times. I think I covered it pretty well. The one thing that I didn't say anything about was something that's very prominent also in this eclipse configuration, which is the Jupiter-Neptune trine. Jupiter is getting closer and closer now to the 15-degree mark that Neptune occupies. And so we have a very strong presence of Neptune by virtue of the fact that it's trine Jupiter. And sure enough, also the degree that Mercury occupies close to the eclipse degree in its backward motion in this eclipse configuration from Saturday is square to Jupiter and in conjunct to Neptune, so it brings that Jupiter-Neptune out. And what is Jupiter-Neptune? That is about really seeing the deeper reason behind things, really seeing the spiritual motive. You could say that we're here on planet Earth for one reason only, and that's to evolve as a culture, as a people, as individuals. And so I think it's very interesting that Neptune is so prominent, excuse me, including the fact that Neptune is actually represents, in some cases, a kind of a confusion in the earthly plane. It's more about the planes beyond the earthly plane, taking a spiritual approach. And so it doesn't work too well in the physical. And it can be also a signal for, not understanding what's going on, for confusion. Could be self-deception, could be deception on the part of others. And we're sure seeing a lot of that, just this whole talk about fake news that's so popular right now, where really both sides of a particular argument are just calling the other one's facts not real and saying it's fake news, And there is literally fake news, stories that are planted to sway public opinion. And Facebook is another one of these big issues of our times, trying to influence public opinion. And what do you trust? How do you know what's real? How do you know what's the right thing when one side says one thing and the other side says the other thing, and they completely contradict each other? How do you make sense of that? And of course, you have to follow your intuition. You have to look to your deepest values and see how that's reflected in what's going on, and see where you really stand. So it's a time of choice and a time of spiritual empowerment, and a time to recognize that we're here to grow. We're here to grow in our characters and try to rise above the situation that we find ourselves in any way that we can. So that's all I want to say right now. I think we'll go back. And it's time to end. I just want to say that it is definitely a testing time, and yet it's also a very valuable time as well. Let's not ignore that. We are here with a chance to change history, and we can tell our grandchildren when we get further down the road, as we're summing up what may be the life that we've lived, that we did a certain thing that we felt like it was the right thing to do, and we empowered ourselves and we empowered the people around us by doing it. And that's the task. That's the task we face. So good luck with that, and have the courage of our times to rise above. And that's the message of these times. See you soon. Take care.